Parks here, an advocate for advancing astronomy. Um, Please forgive me, I am live streaming from my new bedroom. I don't intend to do that very often, so hopefully all the tech works out and good. The sound on that is off. So, why am I going live? Well, a couple different things. As the name of this, and hopefully the audio is good. I haven't really checked it. Again, new setup. As the title of this stream would suggest, I'm going to talk a little bit about body image issues that I have, but also for those of you who are interested in the astronomy aspect of my channel, I will be talking about the aspects of the Copernican revolution and how it relates to worldview. Well, when it comes to body image and that sort of thing, it's related to the fact that I am very briefly on an episode of Queer Eye. And let me see if I can bring that up for you. Whoops, that's not the right one.
I was like, what do sailors do? They look.
No, that doesn't seem to be working. I wonder if it has something to do with my stream being on.
Your North Star.
Yeah, apparently, I'm guessing that YouTube is probably not letting me show the video on live stream, but what I can say is if you look at around the 32-minute mark during this conversation, go away. Around the 32-minute mark, let's get rid of that. Around the 32-minute mark, you'll get to see me in the observatory with Karamo and the hero of that particular episode, and I don't say you can see that I'm speaking to them. It's a side view. Like I said, I'm on the screen twice for basically a blink of an eye, but I'm on there. And initially, I didn't think that I was. Initially, I didn't think that I was there because I watched the episode kind of on two times, and because I'm on there so short, for such a brief period of time, I didn't see it. So somebody texted me and said that they saw me on the show, and so I checked it out. Morning, Indy, and howdy, Flurfament Supervisor. I don't know if I've seen you on here before. But yeah, I'm definitely, I know I've taken a kind of a break in terms of posting and broadcasting and all that kind of good stuff, but hopefully I can make it more of a regular habit. But anyway, getting back to this thing. And so I didn't really tell people about it because I didn't think I was on it, but then I found out that I was, and I looked at it, and I told someone that means something to me about it, and I was scared to do so because of how I looked in that video. I am not happy with how heavy I am. I'm not looking for I'm not fishing for compliments. I'm not doing any of that nonsense. But suffice it to say, I'm not happy with how heavy I am. To the point I've given thought of going to my GP and seeing if I can get my ass on a Ozempic, but I don't want to do that because I really don't feel that I have given a legitimate try to mitigate my weight or manage my weight through diet and exercise. And so I want to give that a go before I get on any kind of medication for it. And the problem with doing that is tied to my mental health, in the fact that my bipolar symptoms don't allow me a lot of energy. And so I have to basically pick and choose what I'm going to focus on and what activities I can focus on, so that I can, say, remain functional. For instance, I spend a lot of time motivating myself and spending a lot of energy actually doing work, in order to continue to be a functional member of society, get a paycheck, and all that sort of thing. One of the reasons why I haven't live streamed in a while is also related to the energy issue. So trying to tack on exercise to that is a bit challenging. I know that's challenging probably for a lot of people to motivate themselves to do it, particularly if they're not in any good kind of shape at all, because it sucks. There are those people who like exercise. I am not one of those fucking people. I hate exercise. Yeah. But looking at myself in pictures and looking at myself in that particular video, I really just do not like how I look anymore. I've hated this jowl that I have. I've thought about cutting it off. Like, if I ever win the lottery, first thing I'm going to do is go to the plastic surgeon and get rid of this fucking thing. And so, really, what I'm just pointing this out is I just want to, when it comes to body image and body positivity and all that kind of good stuff, I just wanted to let folks know that men deal with this as well. That there is that I look at mass media, I look at TV, movies, and whatever, and I see the men that the characters drool over, and I see that I am not that, and it sucks, and I hate myself, kick myself for it. One of the things that drove me, like, it's really weird. So I watched a little bit of K-pop Hunters, and it's Demon Hunters, and there's a scene where the three demon hunters, they see the boy band, the evil boy band, and they're like, they suck, and I think they may even know that they're demons. And then one of them lifts up their shirt and sees abs, and then two of them just go gaga. They just forget the fact that these guys are supposed to be evil, and it's that sort of bullshit. It's like, that's that is telling me, what I'm reading from that is what telling me is that I am not attractive because I do not have those abs. I would not provoke that kind of response because I do not have those abs. I do not feel desirable, and so therefore, my self-confidence is shaken, and my self-confidence is shaken, which for someone with bipolar symptoms, with who has basically self-image issues or self-confidence issues anyway, this isn't fucking helping. So, I just kind of, again, wanted to put out there that when it comes to the body image, body positivity range of things, to me it seems very feminine centric, talking about female body shapes, female types, but I do not really see in media anyone talking about body positivity in terms of the masculine, in terms of men, in terms of what the expectations are for how a man should look. I mean, we have fucking gym bros, for instance. I mean, there is a category of people known as gym bros. Why is there a category of people known as gym bros? Could it possibly be because they are trying to sculpt their bodies into a form that society has deemed to be the most successful or most desirable? I'm not being critical of gym bros. Do what you do. If you like that sort of thing, go nuts. I hate fucking exercise, so fuck it. I'm not going to do it. But anyway, so I think there needs to be a broader conversation about this. I'm really not the person to really lead that conversation, but I do want, if there are people who are a part of that or feel that they can talk about it, bring the dudes into it, because I think there are dudes out there who have a lot to say about this particular issue. So that is all I'm really going to say about that. So, Copernican revolution. Well, the Copernican revolution, if you don't know, is a time in the late Renaissance, late 1500s to early 1600s. It, in a sense, starts with um, it starts with Nicholas Copernicus, a Catholic priest, and ends with Galileo Galilei, who is also a fervent Catholic, but got in obviously in trouble with the Catholic Church. Um, if you want to read an interesting series, there was a Washington Post reporter who did a year-long series on exercising himself from schlub to Adonis. An interesting read that convinced me that it is something. I'll come back to that. Ends with Galileo. Um, and the main fruit of this revolution was the previous geocentric model of the universe, where you had a spherical Earth surrounded by the sun, the moon, and the five known planets. And then after that, it wasn't worth it. Okay. Um, the exercising. Yeah, yeah. I would not be surprised by that reporter's experience. But anyway, um, it changed from a spherical Earth centric model of the sun, moon, five known planets, and stars, and moving the Earth into the planetary position, basically moving the sun into the center of the solar system and going from there. The Copernican model itself, his mathematical model that he put forth in De Revolutionibus, something, 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 um, it was it had two advantages over the Ptolemaic model in that it was far simpler to use, and it gave another piece of information, an additional piece of information aside from the predictive power of where the planets were going to be um, at any particular time. Howdy, UK PI. I'm doing all right, hanging in there. Hope you are doing the same. And sorry, I keep interrupting my own thoughts. Um, now the train is completely derailed. Um, so the Copernican model was no better at predicting the future position of planets than the Ptolemaic model was. But, like I said, it was far easier to use, and it was able to give the relative distances between planets. So, for example, the Copernican model basically let us know that Mars is 1.5 times as far away from the sun as the Earth is. And if you go down to two decimal places, he's bang on when it comes to Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. It gets a little sloppy when he gets to Jupiter, and it gets a lot sloppy when he gets to Saturn. Although he does still get it within an order of magnitude, which is remarkable considering the tools that he had, the data that he had at the time, and um, the tools and the mathematical tools that he had at the time. I'm sure he was a brilliant mathematician. No, I'm not going to go off on a tangent where I basically don't think that Copernicus was actually an astronomer. I'll save that for something later. Anyway, but I've always been curious as to what motivated Copernicus to develop this model, because the he was a Catholic priest at this point, so the primacy of the Earth was very important. The Earth is God's creation, humanity is God's children, and so obviously we should be at the center of the universe, or at least the prevailing theological viewpoint was that, and in fact that was still the issue all the way through to Galileo. When it comes down to it. So I was curious why a man of faith would come up with this, basically embark upon trying to solve this particular problem. Because basically from the time of Ptolemy, there had not been any significant changes to the heliocentric or the geocentric model. There were no major advancements with the model. There were adjustments because obviously there needs to be adjustments because the Ptolemaic model is incorrect. It will fail after a certain amount of time given the precision or given the accuracy of the measurements of the day. And so the planetary positions had to be retabulated every so often, and there were some Islamic astronomers who did this, and I think they also tweaked the model a little bit, changed the epicycles, changed the deference, that sort of thing. But no real structural change, particularly no fundamental paradigm shifting change, was done to that model until the late 1500s with Copernicus. So you're talking about a span of roughly 1500 years where the system that we used or they used to predict the planets, the position of planets, the system that would describe the known universe at the time, that system was left untouched. It was basically languished in what had happened. So I was very curious, and still am very curious, as to what would motivate a man like Copernicus to take on this particular topic. And I've run into, I do what I do, and I read, specifically books. I don't like websites. This is The Copernican Revolution by Thomas Kuhn. I can never figure out what his name is. In comparison to his other works that I've read, this is fantastic. I mean, it's good anyway. It's fantastic anyway, but it's far more readable. He is much more clear in his points. His language is not as esoteric as in other works that I've read. This is one of his earlier works, from my understanding, so maybe that has something to do with it. But I highly recommend it if you're interested in the history of astronomy and the history of astronomical thought, particularly in terms of fundamental philosophical changes. Then this is sort of a must-read for you. So I, picked that up and read it. And I've read, and obviously this is not the first foray that I have into this particular topic. So I knew that there was a practical reason for why Copernicus took this on. And that was because the Julian calendar that was still used at that date sucked. Basically, it was inaccurate. It was essentially inaccurate. It basically placed this. I think it was forward where the vernal equinox, the first day of spring, was actually well into summer. So it was significantly off to the point that people really it became unusable in a way. I'm not entirely certain how it became unusual. I'd never have gotten into the nitty-gritty specifics of it, but it became so unusable that the Pope weighed in on this, that the Pope felt that, something needed to change, and we and the church actually needed to fix it, which I think is fairly remarkable. So he convened basically a think tank, study, task force. He got respected astronomers together, and he said, "Hey, fix this." And Copernicus was invited to this, and he initially apparently turned it down. He initially said, "I cannot join this," because the Ptolemaic model, the basis for the calendar of figuring out where things are at any particular time, is ultimately too flawed. That there is a significant fundamental problem with the Ptolemaic model. And so that seems to have motivated him to take on the task of replacement, of figuring out, not replacement, no, figuring out a better system of the Ptolemaic model. Because when you are confronted with a scientific model or scientific theory that, Travis, I'll get to that in a second, When you are confronted with a scientific theory that fails, that there are predictions that it makes that do not match observations, namely, the thing that always comes to my mind is when it comes to Newtonian gravity and the orbit of Mercury. There was a precession of the Mercurian orbit that Newtonian gravity could not account for. There was no mechanism within that theory to explain why that precession should occur at that particular magnitude or that particular size. So when you are confronted with this, when you start having a failure within the predictive power of a scientific theory, you are left with two options, vaguely. The first option is adjustment, is trying to figure out if there is something that you can add or change to the theory that will basically bring it in line with observations. A prime example of this is the migratory mechanisms within planetary formation. So one of the first planets that orbits around another star that we have discovered was 51 Peg b specifically, which is a hot Jupiter. It's basically a planet that is a gaseous planet, half the mass of Jupiter, 10 times closer to its host star than Mercury is. Now, in the Nice model, which was what described how planetary systems came into being, including our own, that's impossible. There is no way that a planet of that composition, of those characteristics, could have formed and existed for any length of time at that particular location. And so what happened was that people were forced to readdress the Nice model, and what they developed was migration. There are a couple of different ways that a planet can move from where it was born to where we find it now. There's interactions with the disk, there are interactions with the other planets, and so forth. So you can alter the model. You can look at, well, maybe there's something we're missing that's in line with the theory, that follows the fundamental physics of the theory, but we just haven't considered yet. Or you do a foundational change. General relativity is a foundational change to Newtonian dynamics. The two are incompatible in terms of their basic framework. Yes, Newtonian dynamics is still usable in certain circumstances. Most terrestrial projects that involve gravity in any way, you can still use Newton's law of gravitation to great effect, because the precision, the difference between what you would calculate or what you would find with Newtonian dynamics as opposed to general relativity is minute. It's in the noise, effectively. So a building is not going to collapse because you didn't take a relativistic view of its structure. However, when we talk about things like GPS, that is no longer the case. Newtonian dynamics is not adequate in order for GPS to work. If you do not take relativistic effects into account, after an hour, your location is going to be off by around 21 kilometers or so. But it goes further than that, in Newtonian dynamics, Newton specifically states that there is an absolute frame of reference, that time is its own entity that is not in any way connected to the spatial coordinates. Information can be transmitted instantaneously, so that if you change the mass of one thing over here, this mass over there will immediately know what's going on. I won't get too far into that. With general relativity, basically it refutes all three of those points. And so they are incompatible when it comes to the basic framework of the two. So with a theory, you can replace it, you can adjust it within the framework, or you replace it with a different framework. Let me see. Travis, all evidence says we are the center of the cosmos. In fact, that is not accurate. Um, well, let's take the. I don't want to get too far into too far off topic, but let's take, for example, um, the astronomical redshift, Hubble's law. Hubble's law, when taken at face value, does seem to suggest that we are the center of the universe because it seems as if all things are expanding outward from us. The problem with that is that it a question, I should say, maybe not a problem, but a question comes into a play where there is no physical mechanism, there is no physical reason for why that should be the case, particularly since we have evidence that the universe is older than the Earth. So why would the universe, the center of the universe, be in a position where nothing existed for several billion years, and then all of a sudden the sun was created, the Earth was created around it, and the universe expanded outward? There's no physical motivation for why that would be the case. It also violates the cosmological principle, where we do have evidence that tells us, or that highly suggests, that the universe is isotropic and homogeneous, meaning that the universe is the same everywhere, no matter where you look or where you're located. And so, if you follow that principle to its logical conclusion, basically anywhere you are in the universe would look as if you are the center of that universe. And from a mathematical prescription, you can, in fact, assume that. That is, again, I may be inaccurate with this. A mathematician might balk at what I'm about to say, but effectively, the assuming a position is the point of reference to everything else is just as valid as saying Jupiter is the center of the universe. Essentially, all positions are now equivalent. In terms of snow and ice, I'm not at work doing this because my car is iced in. So, doing all right. So, Travis, who I do not think is still watching, there is one, I would say that there is your statement that all evidence suggests that we are the center of the cosmos is inaccurate. And two, the evidence that does support this notion that we are the center of the universe can be explained from other evidence. But that touches on something that is related to what I'm talking about. If you are a fan of this channel, if you follow this channel for a significant period of time, you have almost invariably heard my opinions on science and worldview. Just as a recap, my assertion is that true science must be blind in the sense that it cannot hold any preconceptions, I suppose. It cannot hold a bias. It cannot believe that something is an effect that it does not already have evidence for, that has not already been scientifically established. It needs to be open to the possibility that there are things that we cannot explain, and that our current understanding of the framework, the basis of science, or our understanding, say general relativity, can be wrong. We must be open to those perspectives. The problem is with people who do not believe that the scientific consensus is correct, or I should say, people that I have encountered. A good number of them will cite various reasons for why this is the case. And The sentiment that we are the center of the cosmos is tied to one of those, which is a religious viewpoint. Is that, as I was saying before, the church back in the 1500s believed, and early 1600s believed that, the earth was primary because it's in Genesis. It was the main place of creation. It is where humanity is. It is where the children of God are. So therefore, it must be the center of all things because it is primary in the Genesis story. That is a worldview. You are taking your viewpoint of how the universe should be because God exists and forcing science to follow along with that, in the sense that any information that science provides that does not that conflicts with that worldview must either be wrong, or it has to be wrong in one way or another. So you are judging observations and you are judging interpretations of those observations not based on science, not based on physical reasoning of this violates the second law of thermodynamics, or this cannot hold because entropy must increase, or, well, I guess that is second law. I don't know. Again, if you've been in the flat earth space, that comes into play a lot. Anyway, there's no physical, the observations aren't violating a physical law. They are violating a philosophical, theological context or structure. So that is what I mean by having a worldview. Hold on. I lost my chat. So I think science has to be, what's going on there? Science has to be open. It has to not have this bias. Now, we're all fallible creatures. So the idea that scientists will not have a bias at all, or will not be affected by their biases at all, is a pipe dream. It is extremely naive to think that that will ever actually happen. But the hope is that the aggregate of the community, that the biases, the individual biases of the community will be mitigated by the sheer size of the community and guidelines and guidelines that we put into place, like peer review, for example. Again, this is all human. This is all a human endeavor. It is flawed. Peer review is not perfect. In some cases, peer review really needs to be looked at and the flaws addressed. But the hope is that these biases will not affect the science. The science is driven by evidence alone. Answers in Genesis, complete reversal of that. They believe that a worldview is necessary for science to continue, that you need to have some idea of how the universe is structured a priori before you can interpret the idea, these new measurements or these new concepts appropriately. And I think that is anathema to the progress of science. That is the exact wrong thing to do, because in doing so, you are limiting possibilities. My favorite example of this is with Einstein saying his famous quote, "God doesn't play dice." He did not accept the uncertainty of quantum mechanics. From a philosophical point of view, he had no physical basis, he had no physical reasoning for why quantum mechanics cannot be a thing, aside from the fact that he did not believe the universe was not deterministic. Determinism is also a worldview. There's no physical reason for why the universe must be determinative, meaning that if you have a full understanding of all physical laws, then you can perfectly predict what is going to happen in the future. There's no reason for why that must be baked into the universe. So even the best of us can be afflicted by these sorts of things. And when we are, again, that eliminates the possibility that these ideas, these new ideas, actually have merit and actually can describe the reality of the situation. Now, I think quantum mechanics really doesn't have it all sorted out either, but to dismiss it as Einstein did, I think is irresponsible. So so it's always been, so I've been curious. So when it comes to my position on worldviews, of scientific worldviews, and my curiosity as to how scientific paradigms shift, I'm I'm kind of at a crossroads. Um, so let me read. So there is the famous passage by Copernicus. I think it's in the what is it, the preface or the forward? Excuse me. Um, Flat earthers love to cherry pick this, and they use this to state that Copernicus actually is some kind of pagan, that he is a sun worshiper, that he is in fact motivated by his own worldview, that he has an agenda when he is creating this, and that agenda is anti-Christian. Um, and I'll just give you the first couple of words, sentences. Uh, in the middle of all sits the sun enthroned in this beautiful temple. Could we place this luminary in any better position from which he can illuminate the whole at once? And so, on the face of it, it seems as if Copernicus is believing that the sun is an entity, is some kind of divine entity, conscious entity. However, when you look at Copernicus's work, his other writings, and obviously the fact he's a Catholic priest, or canon, um, it's clear that he's using the sun, the sun, as an allegory for God. Now, let's move to Kepler. Kepler, who was also Catholic, I think he was German, so he may have been Lutheran. I don't know. He definitely believed in God. Let's put it that way. He was the one who refined the Copernican model. It refined to the heliocentric model to what it is today. Basically, he came up with his three laws of planetary motion, and they are effectively the framework from which all solar system physics is derived. And actually, um, well, there's more to it than that, but effectively, he was the his his three laws of planetary motion were foundational to the development of Newtonian gravity. Let's go with that. So I'm going to read you a fairly long passage. Apologies. This is by Kepler. The sun is a fountain of light, rich in fruitful heat, most fair, limpid, and true to the sight, the source of vision, portrayer of all colors, through himself empty of color, called king of the planets for his motion, heart of the world for his power, its eye for his beauty, and which alone we should judge worthy of the Most High God. Big G, Christian God. Should he be pleased with a material domicile, and chose a place in which to dwell with the blessed angels. He goes on by saying, for if the Germans elect him as Kaiser, who has more power in the whole empire, who would hesitate to confer the votes of the celestial motions on him who already has been administering all other motions and changes by the benefit of the light, which is entirely his possession? And finally, hence by the highest right, we return to the sun, who alone appears by virtue of his dignity and power, suited for his mode of duty and worthy to become the home of God himself, not to say the first mover. That first mover part actually it goes back to an Aristotelian idea of the movement of spheres being the cause of the motion of all things. But what I want to highlight is that this is obviously a worldview. He is basically making the case that it is natural for the sun to be at the center of all things because it is brilliant, it is beautiful, it is bright, it is a heavenly, or it is the source of power. So obviously, the most powerful, brightest, most beautiful object in the universe is the only place suitable for God to reside. Again, this is not a physical reason or a physical justification for why the sun should be the center of all things. It is a philosophical one. So it does seem, excuse me, I can ignore that. It does seem that Copernicus was motivated, Kepler was motivated to develop this system. Let me back off the word motivated. Influenced. Howdy, Victoria. Both Copernicus and Kepler were influenced by their theology. They thought it was right and proper for the sun to be at the center of all things because the sun's power and luminance were akin to the bright and power of God. Now, I would generally say that that is not how, that is wrong. That is poor science. But now I'm thinking that am I being naive? Am I being too restrictive? I have a short video called Science is Not Woke. And I stand by that video. And in that video, I state that science, the results of scientific inquiry are morally neutral. They simply exist. Homosexuality being a biological characteristic of a human is simply a scientific result. There is no agenda behind that. Now, what you do with that fact, what you do with that piece of evidence, I should say, that is entirely up to you. That is, now you are free to put whatever worldview you want onto that analysis. But the science itself does not have an agenda. Heliocentric astronomy is not satanic. The astronomical community is not attempting to convert people away from God. They're not trying to convert people to God. It's not science. The community itself has nothing to say on the subject. Now, there are a number of very loud anti-theist astronomers. Neil deGrasse Tyson, Lawrence Krauss, scientists, I should say. What's his face? God delusion dude. Dawkins. There are people who will put forward that science does in fact prove that God doesn't exist. That is their worldview. That is their moral position or philosophical position on the scientific data themselves. The science itself has nothing to say about God's existence. So you are the one who has to, you are the one who is, or they are the one, anyone is the one who interprets this data in the way they want to. So they are placing their worldview on top of it. And I suppose that's what's happening here, is that Copernicus finds that his heliocentric model is correct, and then basically places divinity on top of it. Explains from a theological point of view why it is natural and proper to claim that the sun is in fact the center of the universe. But let me put a pin on Copernicus for a second and go with Kepler. That certainly applies with Kepler, because Kepler's model definitively had better predictive power. It was able to determine the positions of the planetary bodies in the future to a much higher accuracy than either the Ptolemaic or the Copernican models. With Copernicus, that's not the case. As I've stated before, the heliocentric model that Copernicus used was still Aristotelian, still had Aristotle baked into it. He actually apparently criticized Ptolemy's model because it wasn't Aristotelian enough. And what I mean by that is one of the principles of Aristotle is that perfection cannot change. That perfection is a quantity that cannot change its aspect. Therefore, perfect motion is motion that does not change its magnitude. So the idea of a celestial body, which is in the realm of perfection, made of the ether, the celestial material, or divine material, if you will, that it had to move in perfect harmony, that it could not change its speed, because a changing speed is, in fact, not perfect. Additionally, a circle is the most perfect geometric shape because it is equidistant from the center. Every position on the circle is the same distance from a point of reference. And Copernicus noted with the Ptolemaic model, Ptolemy actually had to get rid of that, the uniform circular motion part of it. Backing that up. He had to account for the apparent changing of planetary speeds by basically making the Earth slightly off-center, adding what is known as a deferent. And so Copernicus was critical of that. He said that Ptolemy was not Aristotelian enough. And so that was one of his motivations for putting the Ptolemaic model behind, or at least was able to abandon it. But that being said, the Copernican model still has uniform circular motion, so that the planets move at a constant rate and the orbits are perfectly circular. Which, let me digress because that's what I do. Let me tell you how irritated I am when people tell me that the heliocentric model is the Copernican model, that our current understanding of the solar system is the Copernican model. It drives me up the fucking wall. The reason for that is, again, from a foundational standpoint. It is not. Copernicus was very clear in that uniform circular motion had to be physically motivated, that it had a physical component. This is not compatible with our current understanding that that orbits can be elliptical. They can be circular, but most of them are elliptical. And when they are elliptical, and because of conservation of angular momentum, you have changing speeds. These two, from a foundational standpoint, are not compatible ideas. So to claim that the heliocentric model is a Copernican model is false, completely and utterly false. If you wanted to give a name to it, then it would be more appropriate to call it a Keplerian system, the Keplerian model. If you wanted to be scientific, it's the Nice model, is the reason why. And Nice is named after the city in Paris where it was developed. Digression over. But yeah, it chaps my ass when I hear that, because it again shows a very fundamental misunderstanding or ignorance of this whole process, this entire scientific revolution and the motivations behind it. But anyway, all of this got me to think, am I being naive? Am I being naive to say that science isn't motivated in this way? Is that the progress of science is not motivated by some overarching worldview? Is our is the cosmological principle not motivated by some worldview of some sort? I would not call it an atheist. If the worldview does exist, I don't know what it is. I don't believe it is atheistic in its nature, um, because I don't find it to be atheistic in its nature at all. And in fact, I think that to me, it is very much in line with the perfection of God's creation. That's besides the point. And I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know. Ultimately, it's a very unsatisfying ending, I suppose, or conclusion of this. But I don't have an answer for that. Um, in that, are we limited? I mean, can we completely divorce our biases? Such as, there is the content, such as, again, I keep coming back to cosmological constant. Is there, um, do we reject certain pieces of information because they conflict with that constant or with that principle, which in itself is an assumption? While we have evidence that supports that principle, again, it is an assumption. Um, when it comes, in my opinion, when it comes down to it, in my opinion, we the evidence does not fully support it. It indicates that it is true, but in my opinion, it does not fully support that it is in fact true, is in fact emblematic of reality. So, is the scientific community, is the astronomical community, um, is it, or has it been, guilty of rejecting information or rejecting evidence solely because of that? I don't think it has. The key example that is often thrown out is the axis of evil, which I contend has been solved. The axis of evil, when you are able to analyze um, the polarization of the data along with everything else, then once you've done that complete analysis, the axis of evil does not exist. There is no anisotropy, which is in line with the plane of the solar system. Um, the axis of evil, which is seen in the three cosmological maps or three micro CMB maps, that is simply a bias of the data analysis process, which was incomplete because it was not analyzing the entire data set. Um, because it was real hard to do. This is a fairly, I've lost the paper where I've read, where I discovered this, and for whatever reason, I'm having a hard time finding it again. But that is my understanding, is the current state of the art understanding of the axis of evil is that it has been shown to not exist. But I bring it up because um, it would indicate, on the face of it, it would indicate that there is some primacy to the Earth, that the solar system does have a preferred position in the grand scheme of the universe, assuming that the cosmic microwave background reflects the same inclination as the solar system. It's hard to not make that sort of connection. And the astronomical community has, from the get go, rejected the idea that this is indications of a anthropomorphic, uh, anthrocentric, human centered worldview. Can't remember if it's anthropomorphic or anthrocentric, where essentially what that means is it is a principle that states that that humanity plays a special role within the universe, um, either because we exist within it and we are observing it, or because the universe, that's the weak version of it. The strong version is that the universe was made to create humanity. I reject both of these from a scientific physical standpoint. that gets into intelligent design, which is something else I've been with struggling with in terms of trying to rectify or reconcile. Do I believe there's an intelligent designer? Yes, obviously, I believe there's God. I believe God is intelligent. And I believe He designed the universe. Now, did He design the universe to um, demonstrate His existence in the way that traditional intelligent design folks would like us to believe? No, I do not believe that that is his intention. Because I don't know his intention, to be honest with you. But again, that to me is putting a worldview um, onto my science. It, in that, if it is taking a look, it is assuming that when I look at the universe, when I look at astronomical data, that somewhere baked in there is a sign from God saying, "Howdy." And I don't and I think that if I were to do that, then I would bias my interpretations towards that conclusion. And I am, even though I do not do any active research at the moment, I am very, very hesitant, very, very afraid to go down that road because again, I firmly believe that science must, in fact, be as unbiased as humanly possible. So, I don't know. Has science been like from a philosophical point, like was I've already talked about Einstein and the fact that he rejected quantum mechanics from a basically philosophical point of view. Was he also did he develop general relativity also in response to a physical or a philosophical point of view? Did he have a notion of how the universe should behave prior to um, his development of relativity, and um, that is what shaped relativity into what it happens to be, and he just happened to be right. Um, I've read a couple of books, one by Adam Frank and another by Hans Kuhn. No, fuck. Why am I blanking on his name? He's a Catholic theologian who often gets in trouble with the Catholic Church. Um, Kung, I think it's Kung, Hans Kung. Um, Both of them, Frank's is the Sacred Flame. Kung's, assuming I got the name right, is Science and Religion, something else. Both of them address this idea of a conflict between science and religion. That today there's the two concepts seem to be combative. That science is basically being used as a cudgel to say that religion and religious thought is wrong and inappropriate, whereas religious thought is being used to say that science is wrong and inappropriate. Well, if you look back at the history, that is actually a fairly modern uh, contrivance. In history, for a very good long period of time, uh, as both Frank and Kuhn acknowledge, religion motivated scientific thinking, or at least heavily influenced it. As I've already mentioned, Copernicus, Kepler, Newton, all of them Galileo, all of them very religious individuals, seemingly from their religious or their writings to be very pious individuals. So it was obvious that they did not have such a contentious relationship, that they believed that science was a method via which God communicated His glory. Um, and I've just derailed as to where I was going with that. Um, so, yeah, I just derailed. Dementia moment. Um, but what I was talking about is the current modern era of this combative nature. Ah, there it is. So with Frank, who is an atheist, or at least agnostic, he does not believe in God. I don't know if he's agnostic or atheist. I can't remember what he says something about it in The Sacred Flame. But he does believe in a pseudo metaphysical quality that drives science, that there is this, and that it is currently missing from today's science, in the sense of when the now that science and religion are combative, it is seen by certain scientists, um, that any sort of philosophical motivation is it should be ignored. That there should not be any philosophical implications, I suppose, for the progressing of science. And um, Frank rejects this. He makes the contention that there is some spark, there is some undefinable characteristic of human nature, something apart from the physical the physical drivers of things that motivates us to look for grander ideas, motivates scientific thought. And he the one thing that I really distinctly remember is he talks about William James, and he talks about how William James studied people who had metaphysical experiences, experiences that involved either God or some divine quantity that could not be explained from a physical point of view. And the conclusion was, at least with James, and I think with Frank, is that these experiences should not be these experiences should not be dismissed, and in fact, they in a way need to be cultivated, because these experiences drove the certain individuals to look deeper into the mysteries of the universe. So to completely divorce scientific inquiry from any kind of philosophical or religious motivation may in fact be inappropriate. But my problem is, or what I'm currently struggling with, again, is that to me that seems to be anathema that's going to bias science. Or how does one do that? How does one use one's faith or use one's philosophical leanings to motivate but not influence um, one's interpretation of scientific data? Is it possible? I don't know. And so I thought I would put that out there and see what other people thought, and see if anyone wants to have a further discussion about this. Because, when it comes to these sorts of discussions, particularly within this sphere, it very much is that combative. If you believe in religion, you are irrational. You believe in some kind of imaginary sky daddy. You shouldn't. Obviously you're fucking crazy, and you should be ignored. That's somewhat hyperbole, but somewhat not. And then on the other hand, if you are religious, then you are part of a satanic cult, that you are in fact attempting to drive people to Satan, and you are evil, and all this sort of other things. Is there a middle ground? Because I reject both notions. Obviously I reject both notions. Is there a middle ground that we can strive for? And I would really love to have that kind of conversation with folks, both on the flat Earth and the globe side, as it were, to see whether or not we can. And I'm tired of the platitudes of, as long as you don't push it on me, then I don't give a shit. well, I'm sorry. Um, this is a part of my identity. I'm not going to hide part of my identity because it makes you feel uncomfortable. I am a Christian. I'm a man of faith. That's what drives me. So when people tell me, as long as you don't push it on me, then I'm okay. One, I don't know exactly what that means. Two, given the responses that I've had in the past, that kind of means that I can't talk about God at all, which is some bullshit, and which is I'm not going to do that in any way whatsoever. So, is there a way? Is there any kind of middle ground with this? Is philosophy? Does philosophy have any appropriate place in scientific inquiry? So, all right. UKPI. How was Copernicus, Kepler, etc. able to model the solar system without the use of tech we have today? Math. Um, this is why I sort of reject the notion that Copernicus is an astronomer, because really he's a mathematician. Same with Kepler. They certainly were not observationalists. They did not make observations themselves, or at least not any substantial observations themselves. Copernicus used, I think, the backlog of observations, which started with Hipparchus, and then progressed through the Islamic age, or the Islamic dominate when the Islamic world dominated astronomical thought. And obviously Kepler used Tycho's work, or Tycho's observations. And they simply fit empirical mathematical laws to the data to see if it would actually fit, to see if, because, you take the data, you know what the formula of a circle is. You take the data and you compute where the orbit would be if it were a circle, and see if it matches the data. And if it matches the data, then great. Then you know that this is a good fit for the model. And from a very fundamental standpoint, we still do that today. So that's essentially how they were able to do it, is they use other people's observations and then fit mathematical forms to that observations. And then once you have an equation, you can then use it to extrapolate or predict what things are going to be like, what the positions of planets are going to be like in the future. Because if it's a circular path, then that circular path is going to be well defined. If it's an elliptical path, that elliptical path is going to be well defined for all time. So, UK, I don't know if you're still watching, but hopefully that answers that question. All right, I think I'm gonna sign off. I pretty much said everything I want to say, and so I've been Professor Parks. I'm an advocate for the advancement of astronomy, and if you like this sort of content, please like, share, subscribe. Really helps. I know you've probably heard this from all content creators, but yeah. But at the very least, thank you so much for watching, and peace out, clear skies.